Right now, as you watch this video, something extraordinary and deeply unsettling is happening. The device you are using to watch this content knows your location. It knows how long you have been awake. It knows what you searched for at 2 in the morning when you thought no one was paying attention. It knows your political leanings, your religious beliefs, your financial anxieties, and your deepest insecurities because you told it. Not in words, but in clicks, in searches, in the videos you paused on for 3 seconds longer than the others. You gave it all of that information willingly, enthusiastically, and for free. Now I want you to think about something. What if a man sitting in a freezing farmhouse in Scotland, dying of tuberculosis, coughing blood onto the pages of a manuscript in 1948, predicted all of this? Not as a possibility, not as a distant warning, but as an inevitability. His name was George Orwell. The book was called 1984, and what he wrote was not fiction. It was a blueprint. Welcome to the Book Line, where today we are going deeper into this book than you have ever gone before. We are going to pull back every layer, explore every dark corridor, and by the time this video ends, you will understand something that will fundamentally change how you see the world around you. Stay with me. This is going to be unlike anything you have watched before. To truly understand the terrifying accuracy of 1984, you cannot begin with the book. You must begin with the man, because everything Orwell wrote was soaked in his own blood, both literally and metaphorically. George Orwell was born Eric Arthur Blair on the 25th of June 1903 in Motihari, in colonial India. His father was a mid-level British civil servant in the opium department of the Indian Civil Service, a detail that Orwell would later reflect on with deep shame, understanding that his very existence was funded by colonial exploitation. The family returned to England when Orwell was just 1 year old, and from his earliest years, he developed an acute sensitivity to class, power, and injustice that would define every word he ever wrote. He attended Eton on a scholarship, surrounded by the children of England's elite, and felt like an outsider every single day. He did not go to university. Instead, he joined the Imperial Police in Burma, enforcing the very colonial system he despised, and the guilt of that experience never left him. When he returned to England, he deliberately chose poverty. He lived among the homeless in London and Paris, sleeping in spikes and washing dishes, experiencing firsthand the crushing dehumanization of the lowest rungs of society. He documented it all in his first major work, Down and Out, in Paris and London, adopting the pen name George Orwell to protect his family from embarrassment. But it was the Spanish Civil War that truly broke him open and rebuilt him as a political prophet. In 1936, he traveled to Spain to fight against Franco's fascists alongside the socialist POUM militia. He was shot in the throat by a sniper. The bullet passed through his neck millimeters from his carotid artery. He survived, but what he witnessed next was almost worse than the wound. He watched his own side, the socialist Republicans, turn on each other in a vicious political purge engineered by Stalinist operatives. He saw innocent men and women he had fought alongside disappear overnight, arrested as traitors for purely political reasons. He saw the newspapers in England report events in Spain that he knew with absolute certainty had never happened. He saw truth being murdered in real time, and he understood with cold clarity that this capacity for manufactured reality was not unique to Stalin or Franco. It lived in every system of power. It was the nature of power itself. He returned to England and joined the BBC as a propagandist during World War II, crafting broadcasts designed to influence opinion in India. He hated every moment of it. In a letter to a friend, he described the BBC as a cross between a girls' school and a lunatic asylum. The bureaucracy, the doublespeak, the cheerful manipulation of truth in service of power. He absorbed it all, catalogued it, and later transformed it into the Ministry of Truth. By 1944, the ideas that would become 1984 were already crystallizing in his mind. He wrote in his notebook that the greatest danger to human freedom was not a foreign invader, but the slow, willing surrender of liberty by ordinary people who believed they were being protected. By 1947, with tuberculosis consuming his lungs, he retreated to a remote farmhouse called Barnhill on the island of Jura. off the coast of Scotland. It was freezing, isolated, and brutally uncomfortable. His typewriter keys jammed in the cold. He typed with bandaged fingers. He coughed blood, and he wrote. He was in a race against his own death, and he knew it. He finished the manuscript in December 1948. 1984 was published on the 8th of June 1949. George Orwell died on the 21st of January 1950, 7 months later. He was 46 years old. The book he gave his last breath to write has never been out of print for a single day since. Now we enter the world itself, and I want you to do something as I describe it. I want you to stop thinking of this as a story, because it is not a story, it is a map. The novel opens with one of the most celebrated first lines in all of English literature. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. That single sentence does everything. The brightness suggests normalcy. The cold suggests hostility. The clocks striking 13, one number past what is natural and expected, tells you that in this world even reality has been quietly altered, and most people are too numb to notice. We are in Airstrip 1, formerly known as Great Britain, now a province of the superstate Oceania. The world has been reorganized into 3 massive superstates, Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, locked in a state of perpetual, shifting war. But here is the critical detail that most summaries miss. The war is not real in any meaningful sense. It is not fought to be won. It is fought to be maintained. War in Oceania is an economic and psychological tool. It consumes excess production, so the working class remains poor and desperate. It provides a permanent external enemy to focus the population's fear and hatred. It justifies total surveillance, total sacrifice, and total obedience. The war is the machinery of control wearing the costume of patriotism. At the center of this world sits Big Brother, a face on every poster, dark hair, dark mustache, hypnotic eyes that follow you wherever you move. Big Brother is watching you. These 4 words are printed everywhere, and they accomplish something profound and deeply psychological. They do not need to be true. The genius of Big Brother is that he may not even exist. No one has ever seen him in person. He is never confirmed as alive. He is a symbol, a psychological anchor, and his true function is not to watch you, but to make you watch yourself. This is the concept of the panopticon, developed by philosopher Jeremy Bentham and later analyzed in chilling depth by Michel Foucault. A prison designed so that every prisoner can be watched at any time, but they never know when they are actually being observed. So they behave as if they are always being watched. All the time. Every moment. Without exception. This is the ultimate efficiency of surveillance. You do not need cameras everywhere if people police themselves. And this principle, this dark, brilliant insight that Orwell encoded into every page of 1984, is the foundational operating system of every authoritarian system that has ever existed. And as we will see, it is the foundational operating system of the Internet. Winston Smith is our guide through this world. He is 39 years old, physically weak, plagued by a varicose ulcer above his right ankle. He is deeply, dangerously ordinary. He works at the Ministry of Truth, one of 4 ministries that govern Oceanian society. The Ministry of Truth handles news, entertainment, education, and the arts, meaning it manufactures and controls all information. The Ministry of Peace handles war. The Ministry of Love handles law and order, which means torture and re-education. The Ministry of Plenty handles economic affairs, which means rationing and manufactured scarcity. Every name is the precise opposite of what the institution does. This is not irony, it is policy. Language is not used to communicate reality in Oceania. Language is used to replace reality. Winston's specific job is to rewrite the past. When the party makes a prediction that turns out to be wrong, Winston finds every document, every newspaper, every record that contains the old prediction and rewrites it to match the new reality. The original documents are destroyed. The corrected versions replace them. History is not recorded in Oceania. It is manufactured daily, like a product on an assembly line. And if you think this sounds impossibly extreme, I want you to consider how many times in the last decade a major institution, a government, a corporation, a social media platform, quietly edited a post, deleted a record, or revised a statement and hoped no one would notice. The past is not as fixed as we believe. The telescreen is Orwell's most famous invention, and it is the point at which his novel transitions from brilliant political satire into something that feels less like fiction and more like a technical specification. In Oceania, every home, every workplace, every public space contains a telescreen, a rectangular metal plaque built into the wall that cannot be turned off. It broadcasts propaganda, news, and military updates 24 hours a day. And it watches. It watches every movement, every expression, every involuntary twitch of emotion. The Thought Police, a secret surveillance organization, analyze the feeds looking for face crime, the involuntary expression of wrong thought on your face. You cannot hide your reaction. You cannot control your micro-expressions, and so you must train yourself at the deepest level to never have the wrong thought, because the wrong thought will eventually reach your face. This is called crime stop in the novel. The ability to stop a dangerous thought before it fully forms, not censoring yourself, pre-censoring yourself at the level of instinct. Now let us compare this to today, and I want you to hold these numbers in your mind. As of 2024, according to research published by Comparitech and cited in investigative reports in The Guardian and Wired magazine, there are approximately 1 billion CCTV surveillance cameras operating on planet Earth. That is one camera for every 8 human beings alive today. In London alone, one of the most surveilled cities on Earth, there is an estimated 1 camera for every 13 people, giving the average Londoner the honor of being caught on camera an estimated 300 times every single day. In China, the government operates what is widely considered the most sophisticated mass surveillance apparatus in human history. The social credit system, documented extensively by Human Rights Watch and reported by the BBC, assigns numerical scores to citizens based on their behavior, their purchases, their social connections, and their online activity. Score too low, and you are banned from purchasing airline tickets. Your children may be denied university admission. Your business license can be revoked. You become, in a very real and terrifying sense, an unperson, which is exactly what the party does to dissidents in 1984. But China is not the only example, and the United States and United Kingdom are not the innocent counterparts they sometimes present themselves as. In June 2013, a 29-year-old NSA contractor named Edward Snowden walked out of his office in Hawaii with 4 laptops and flew to Hong Kong. What he released to journalists Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras shocked the world. The NSA's PRISM program had been secretly collecting the internet communications of millions of people worldwide, not just suspects, not just persons of interest, but millions of ordinary citizens who had done nothing wrong. The program had the cooperation of major technology companies including Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple, Yahoo, and others. Your emails, your video calls, your search history, all of it flowing silently into the intelligence apparatus of the United States government, without your knowledge, without a warrant, without your consent. When Snowden's revelations broke, sales of 1984 on Amazon increased by approximately 9,700%. Within a single week. People were not reaching for this book as entertainment. They were reaching for it as a field guide, as an explanation for something they had just discovered was real. And yet, as disturbing as government surveillance is, there is an argument that the corporate version is more profound in its reach and more insidious in its method. Your smartphone contains a microphone, multiple cameras, a GPS tracker, an accelerometer that measures how you move, and a gyroscope. It connects to cell towers that triangulate your position to within a few meters. It tracks which apps you use, for how long, at what time of day. Your social media platforms build detailed psychological profiles of you, not just based on what you post, but based on what you look at without posting. Instagram knows which photographs you spent 4 seconds on instead of 2. Spotify knows not just what music you like, but what emotional state you are in based on what you choose at specific times of day. And this data is sold, aggregated, analyzed, and used to influence your purchasing decisions, your political opinions, and your emotional state. Orwell's Telescreen watched you and reported to the government. Our devices watch us and report to corporations, who then sell those reports to governments, advertisers, political campaigns, and anyone else who can afford the data. The Telescreen was forced into your home. You paid £700 for yours, and you carry it everywhere you go. Of all the weapons in the party's arsenal, Newspeak is perhaps the most terrifying, because it is the most subtle, and because it is happening right now in ways that most people have not yet recognized. Newspeak is the official language of Oceania, and it is being developed by the party's linguists with a single, extraordinary goal: to make thought crime literally impossible. Not illegal. Impossible. The theory is elegant and horrifying in equal measure. If you eliminate the word for freedom, people cannot think about freedom, because thoughts require language to exist in any organized, transmissible form. You cannot rebel if you do not have the vocabulary of rebellion. You cannot articulate injustice if the words for injustice have been removed from the dictionary. Every year, the Newspeak dictionary gets thinner. The appendix of the novel, written as a scholarly essay on the principles of Newspeak, is one of the most chilling pieces of writing in the English language, because Orwell clearly had a profound understanding of what modern linguists call the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or linguistic relativity, the theory that the language you speak shapes the thoughts you can think. He did not use that terminology, but he built an entire authoritarian system on its logic. Now let us bring this into 2024. Because what is happening to language in our current moment is both more complicated and more dangerous than simple deletion. On social media platforms, specific words and phrases are shadow banned, meaning content containing them is quietly suppressed without the user being notified. Algorithms filter speech based on community guidelines that are often opaque, inconsistently applied, and subject to change without announcement. Political debate has been compressed into formats, tweets, short videos, sound bites, that structurally prevent nuance. Complex issues are reduced to binary positions. You are either for or against. There is no language for the middle, for the uncertain, for the honestly confused. At the same time, the opposite of deletion is also happening. We are drowning in information. According to research from the Reuters Institute at the University of Oxford, the sheer volume of news, opinion, and misinformation available online has created a phenomenon called news fatigue, where people disengage from information altogether because the cognitive cost of sorting truth from falsehood has become too high. This is not Newspeak by deletion. This is Newspeak by flood. The result is identical: a population that cannot think clearly, cannot articulate resistance, and cannot organize around a shared understanding of reality. Orwell called it doublethink, the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both as true. He called it the most powerful tool of the party. We call it the comment section. The literary community has been dissecting 1984 for over 7 decades, and some of the most piercing insights have come not from universities, but from the passionate, relentless minds on Reddit's book communities, literary forums, and analysis channels. These fan theories deserve serious attention because the best of them reveal dimensions of the novel that even academic criticism has overlooked. The most haunting and widely discussed theory is the controlled rebellion hypothesis. According to this reading, Winston's entire journey, his diary, his relationship with Julia, his contact with O'Brien, his apparent membership in the Brotherhood, was engineered by the party from the very beginning. O'Brien was never a fellow rebel. He was Winston's assigned handler. The Brotherhood does not exist, or if it does, it is entirely controlled by the inner party. The purpose of this elaborate theater is not simply to catch one thought criminal. It is systematic. The party identifies individuals with rebellious tendencies and deliberately cultivates their rebellion, giving them just enough hope to fully commit, and then destroys them with maximum visibility, as a permanent demonstration of the futility of resistance. The rebellion itself is a product of the system. Hope is the most sophisticated trap ever designed. The second theory concerns Julia, and it is deeply uncomfortable because it forces a reinterpretation of the only genuine human warmth in the novel. The theory, supported by careful textual analysis shared across multiple Reddit threads and later discussed by academic critics, is that Julia was not a genuine rebel, but a thought police operative assigned to Winston. Evidence includes the speed with which she approaches him, the deliberate nature of her seduction, her seemingly detailed knowledge of safe locations, and the speed and completeness of her eventual confession. Some theorists go further, suggesting that her apparent betrayal of Winston in Room 101 was not weakness, but mission completion. If this is true, then the only love story in the novel is a fabricated operation, and Winston's one genuine human connection was a weapon deployed against him. The horror of this theory is not just what it says about Winston. It is what it says about the party's understanding of human psychology. They know that the most effective surveillance is emotional. They know that the fastest route to a person's inner world is through their heart. The third theory concerns something far larger and far darker. What if Oceania is not one of three superstates? What if Oceania is the only superstate and Eurasia and Eastasia are complete fabrications? What if the war is not a simplified, distorted version of a real conflict, but a total fiction, a studio production staged by the inner party to justify permanent emergency measures? There is no character in the novel who has ever been to Eurasia or Eastasia. There is no independent verification of the war. All information about it flows through party-controlled channels. The rockets that fall on London's prole districts could be fired by the party itself. Under this reading, Oceania does not control the world by conquering it. It controls the world by inventing its enemies and maintaining the fiction of an outside. The population is not trapped in one superstate. They are trapped on a stage, performing a war that exists only in the telescreens and the newspapers. This theory sounds extreme until you consider how many historical conflicts have involved manufactured provocations, false flag operations, and government-created enemies. It sounds extreme until you consider that the most powerful tool of control any government possesses is not the army, it is the narrative. The 1984 film adaptation, directed by Michael Radford, is one of the most courageous and committed acts of filmmaking in British cinema history.
Radford made a decision that was almost unprecedented. He shot the entire film on location in London during the actual months of April and May 1984, in the exact temporal and spatial setting that Orwell had specified. He wanted the audience to feel that they were watching something that was happening now, not in a speculative future. He deliberately chose decaying post-industrial locations, the Beckton Gasworks, the Roundhouse,
the alcoves of the Barbican, to create a visual landscape that felt simultaneously historical and present. The color palette was drained of warmth. Every frame was cold, gray, and exhausted. In interviews, Radford explained that he wanted to show not the dramatic violence of oppression, but its true character, monotony. The real weapon of totalitarianism is not the spectacular torture. It is the daily, relentless gray of a life lived without beauty, without color, without surprise, without hope. Actor John Hurt, who portrayed Winston Smith with devastating authenticity, revealed in interviews that Radford deliberately kept the set cold and uncomfortable. Costumes were worn for days without washing. The food in the canteen scenes was genuinely unappetizing. The actors were kept isolated from each other during specific filming sequences to simulate the atomization that Oceanian society enforces. Hurt said that by the final weeks of filming, he had genuinely lost weight, genuinely felt paranoid, and genuinely struggled to maintain a sense of self outside the character. He described it as the most psychologically challenging role of his career, not because of the dramatic intensity of specific scenes, but because of the cumulative effect of sustained, low-level oppression. This is a profoundly important artistic insight. Totalitarianism does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives as bureaucracy, as inconvenience, as a form you have to fill out one more time, as a rule that seems reasonable until it isn't, as a slow thickening of the air until breathing becomes an act of resistance. In Orwell's final years, as tuberculosis made writing increasingly difficult, he gave a small number of interviews and wrote letters that function as his literary testament. In his essay, Why I Write, he states with crystalline clarity that every serious line he had written since 1936 was directed against totalitarianism and in defense of democratic socialism as he understood it. He was not writing propaganda for the left or the right. He was writing a warning that transcended political affiliation. In a letter to his publisher, Victor Gollancz, he clarified that the book was not meant to suggest that the English-speaking world was already totalitarian, but to show where it could go if certain tendencies were not actively resisted. He used the word tendencies very deliberately. Not systems, not governments, tendencies. The tendency to accept convenient lies. The tendency to trade liberty for safety. The tendency to let language slide into vagueness. The tendency to trust institutions without questioning them. These tendencies, he argued, were not peculiar to fascists or communists. They were human. They were in all of us. And that is the most frightening thing he ever wrote. In 2019, Harvard Business School professor Shoshana Zuboff published a landmark work called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, and it accomplished something remarkable. It provided the academic and economic framework for understanding exactly how Orwell's nightmare evolved into something he did not fully predict. Zuboff argues that the dominant economic logic of the 21st century is not simply capitalism or even digital capitalism, it is surveillance capitalism, a system in which human experience itself has been claimed as a raw material, harvested without consent, processed into predictive data products, and sold in behavioral futures markets. In plain English, your life, your behavior, your emotions, your relationships, your fears, and your desires are being continuously mined, analyzed, and sold to the highest bidder. You are not the customer of these systems. You are the raw material. What makes this more sophisticated, and in many ways more frightening than Orwell's Telescreen, is the mechanism of consent. In Oceania, the Telescreen was imposed by force. In our world, the equivalent system was built on desire. We wanted to stay connected. We wanted free email. We wanted to share our photographs. We wanted to know what our friends were doing. And so we handed over our data with joy and enthusiasm, clicking I agree on terms of service documents that no human being has ever fully read, signing away the rights to our behavioral data in exchange for the ability to post a photograph with a filter on it. The exchange seemed fair because we did not understand what we were giving. We thought we were trading our data for a service. We were actually trading our autonomy for the illusion of connection, and the companies understood this exchange with perfect clarity while we did not understand it at all. This asymmetry of understanding is the defining characteristic of surveillance capitalism, and it is something Orwell's binary model of oppressor and oppressed was not designed to capture. The predictive power of modern data systems has now reached a level that would have seemed impossible even 20 years ago. Academic research from the University of Cambridge, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, demonstrated that by analyzing just 68 Facebook likes, researchers could predict a person's skin color with 95% accuracy, their sexual orientation with 88% accuracy, their political affiliation with 85% accuracy, and their intelligence level, religious beliefs, alcohol and drug use, and relationship status, all from 68 likes. The average Facebook user has given approximately 227 likes. The system knows you more intimately than your closest friends. It knows you better than you know yourself. And it uses that knowledge not to help you, but to predict and manipulate your future behavior in the service of commercial interests. Big Brother wanted to control what you thought. The algorithm wants to control what you want. The distinction is important and deeply unsettling, because controlling desire is something far more fundamental than controlling thought. The resonance of 1984 is not confined to the English-speaking world. And understanding its global impact is essential to understanding why this book continues to be both a bestseller and a banned book simultaneously in various parts of the world. In Russia, Orwell's works were banned throughout the Soviet era. The parallels between the party and Soviet Stalinism were too obvious and too damning. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the book flooded Russian bookstores and became, for a generation of Russians, a foundational text for understanding what they had lived through. Ironically, in contemporary Russia under Vladimir Putin, there are reports of the book once again becoming difficult to obtain and discuss openly, as the political atmosphere has shifted in ways that make Orwell's mirror uncomfortable for those in power. In North Korea, the most comprehensively surveilled and controlled nation on Earth, 1984 is of course not available. But defectors who have managed to escape and read the book in South Korea or elsewhere have consistently reported the same reaction: shock, recognition, and grief. Not because the book revealed something new to them, but because it confirmed something they had always felt, but never had the language to articulate. One defector, interviewed by the BBC, said simply that reading the book felt like reading the story of her own country, and that the most painful part was the ending, because Winston Smith's story ended the same way she feared her country's story would end, with love for the oppressor, so thoroughly instilled that resistance becomes unimaginable. In the United States and the United Kingdom, the book occupies a strange dual status. It is taught in schools. It is celebrated as a masterwork of English literature. Its vocabulary, Big Brother, Doublethink, Thought Crime, Newspeak, Room 101, has been absorbed into everyday speech. Politicians across the political spectrum invoke Orwell's name to describe their opponents. And yet, reading the book closely and honestly requires confronting the possibility that the tendencies Orwell described are not safely located in some foreign authoritarian regime. They are present in the systems we participate in every day. They are present in the surveillance infrastructure of our own democratic governments. They are present in the algorithmic management of our information environment. They are present in the political language of our elected representatives, who increasingly use words not to communicate reality, but to manage perception. The book is comfortable when it describes someone else's tyranny. It is deeply uncomfortable when it describes our own. We have traveled a long way together in this video. We have walked through the life of a dying man who gave everything he had to write a warning. We have moved through the gray corridors of Oceania and felt the weight of the telescreen's unblinking eye. We have held the parallels between Orwell's imagination and our present reality up to the light and found them disturbingly close. We have heard from theorists who argue that even the novel's thin threads of hope, love, rebellion, solidarity were designed by the party to be pulled apart. And we have heard from Orwell himself in his essays and letters, the quiet, steady voice of a man who simply wanted people to see clearly, to think clearly, and to refuse the comfortable lie. So here is the question that this book ultimately demands of every reader, in every generation, in every country on Earth. Is 1984 a map or a mirror? If it is a map, it shows us where we are heading, and there is still time to choose a different road. If it is a mirror, it shows us where we already are, and the work of resistance must begin immediately. The honest answer, arrived at through everything we have examined today, is that it is both. It is a map of roads we are already traveling. It is a mirror showing a reflection we are still free to turn away from, but only if we are willing to look at it honestly. The surveillance infrastructure is real. The manipulation of language is real. The algorithmic curation of reality is real. The manufactured consent is real. But we are not Winston Smith. Winston Smith had no access to a book called 1984. He had no one to show him the blueprint of the system he was trapped in. We do. We have it right now. And that is the one advantage Orwell could not have foreseen. The warning survived. The book lives. And as long as it lives, so does the possibility of resistance. The final paragraph of 1984 is 6 words long. He loved Big Brother. It is the most devastating sentence in English literature because it represents the completion of a project that began long before Winston was arrested. The project was not his imprisonment, it was his transformation. They did not want to kill Winston Smith. They wanted to make him want to live in their world, willingly, joyfully, forever. And they succeeded. That is the true horror. Not the boot, not the cage, not the pain, the love. The question Orwell leaves us with, across 75 years and every border on Earth, is this: what are we being trained to love? And are we paying attention? If this analysis has moved something in you, if it has opened a door in your thinking that you did not know was there, then I want to ask you to do something right now. Not for this channel, for yourself. Go and read 1984, or read it again with everything you have learned today sitting in the back of your mind. Read the appendix on Newspeak and understand that Orwell wrote it in the past tense, as if Newspeak had already come and gone, as if Oceania had already fallen, as if the party's control was already over. A tiny hidden ember of hope buried in the structure of the text itself. Read it and notice the moments that feel familiar, the moments that feel like Tuesday, the moments that feel like your phone, your news feed, your political conversation. And then ask yourself the question that Winston Smith never had the opportunity to ask: what will I do about it? Subscribe to the book line, because next week we are going inside the mind of Aldous Huxley, the man who wrote Brave New World and argued that the dystopia we should fear was not one that controlled us through pain, but one that controlled us through pleasure. A world not of telescreens and torture chambers, but of entertainment, comfort, and carefully managed happiness. A world that looks, in many ways, almost exactly like ours. Drop a comment below with one word. What single word from today's analysis will you carry with you? Share this video with someone who is still sleepwalking through the digital world we have all inherited. Because George Orwell gave his last breath to make sure we were warned. The least we can do is make sure the warning reaches as many ears as possible. Keep reading, keep questioning, keep thinking for yourself. This is The Book Line, and I will see you next one.